Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for being here and taking the time to join us today. My name is Omar Dahi. I'm an associate professor of economics at Hampshire College, a research associate at the Political Economy Research Institute at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, and director of the Security in Context Initiative, the initiative that we are very proud and happy to be launching today in this event. This initiative really is the product of the hard work and support of many of the individuals who are here with us today, and many others who are not with us, but who you'll be hearing from over the coming weeks and months. Today, we'd like to share with the rest of you some of the discussions that we've been having over the past year. This project has really come together over the past year through discussions with everyone that is here today and others, as I mentioned. And we're very happy now to be moving forward, to be sort of going live and public and sharing with the rest of the world some of the ways in which this initiative is going to make contributions across many themes and in different contexts. The individuals and networks who have shaped this initiative, and I'll be introducing them in a moment, have in common, in addition to their distinguished scholarly and policy work, a long-standing commitment to struggles for peace, social justice, and equitable human development, each in their own fields or areas of focus. Together and through this initiative, we seek to shed light on the ongoing investments by various actors around the world in control, securitization, militarism, policing, criminalization, and warfare that shape the lives of so many people around the world, and do so with a focus and centering perspectives from and about the global South. We seek to understand, critique, and hopefully conceptualize alternatives to the narrative, practices, technologies, infrastructures, and other processes that shape those investments. Just as importantly, we want to shed light on the connections between these processes and other struggles and major issues of global concern, including the climate crisis, the various economic crises unfolding around the world, but also significant global economic and political reorganization of power. In many cases, we hope the research we conduct will tell different stories than those that dominate public or even academic discussions. However, we are aware that there is not one, but many alternatives, many stories to be told, often marginalized, often by actors that are not given as much attention as they should have. And this is where our notion of context comes in. The processes we're going to be talking about occur at many scales and many registers. Some are in the news, others aren't, but that totality, we hope, will allow us to shed light on various important global dynamics. So I'm happy to be joined by many people who will help introduce this project and its many components. I'm going to mention their names very quickly and then introduce them one by one. All their longer bios are on a Security in Context website, and really very privileged to have them on board. They've been decisive in many ways in shaping the initiative as it is today. This includes Paul Amar, Firat Demir, Giulia Dardiry, Fikret Adaman, Nicole Grove, Lisa Hajjar, Rabie Nasser, Zaynab Bernoussi, and Karim Maqdisi. What I'd like to do is to just briefly mention what are some of the main components of the project before introducing our various speakers, and also to acknowledge and thank the support of many individuals and organizations who are not here with us today, but who have been really crucial in supporting us. The project will have several main components. We'll be initiating research themes and clusters that will be led and overseen by project researchers, some of the ones who are here today and who will talk a little bit about some of those themes. And these research themes will be varied and really be a major contribution, we hope, in terms of original research and original contributions by the project. In addition, we are, from the very beginning, highlighting engagement and networking with centers, individuals, and other networks in the global South who cross the academic and policy world, but all have a strong commitment towards public engagement and public deliberation on the themes of their focus. Some of them define their research in terms of critical security studies, others in terms of political economy and human development, but all of them enable us to have a better understanding of the production of insecurities worldwide. And this is really a focus on the project rather than simply looking at the security in the traditional perspectives, looking at the generation and reproduction of insecurities for communities and societies throughout the world. A third major component of the project is public engagement, particularly with heterodox communities, communities that have been affected by the processes that this project researches, who have been affected by processes of securitization or militarization, or those who have their own agendas of combating them or producing alternatives. In the coming months and in the coming year, we'll be looking to increase mentorship and training of junior students and graduate students through our various centers and networks, as well as thinking about developing pedagogical outputs for students and educators who are interested in implementing or teaching these topics. And of course, we hope that our website and our various locations where we hold our meetings will become platforms for discussions from within and outside the project through articles, roundtables, or series of informed commentary on many of these topics. Before I introduce our first speaker, I want to thank so many people who are not here with us today, but who have either directly worked through the project, through advising it, or supporting it in various ways, were very crucial to its success. Some of them are leading major components of the project, but others have had other roles, such as advisory roles or support roles that have really made this happen. And these include Samir Aboud, Pete Moore, Michael Clare, Basilius Zeno, Katia Hayek, Bob Vitalis, Bassam Haddad, MK Smith, and the Arab Studies Institute have been incredible in their support from the beginning of this project and have helped us in so many ways. Satani Shami and Jana Shamma of the Arab Council of the Social Sciences have also been there, and the seeds of this project have really emanated from the support of the Arab Council in terms of our commitments, some of which you'll hear about today through our networks, particularly with the Beirut School of Critical Security Studies. For the past year, while we've been developing this project, it has been and continues to be hosted at the University of Massachusetts in Amherst. And we've been lucky to get significant support at the university. I'll mention some of those who are involved. These include Professors Amal Ahmad, Regine Spector, David Mednikov. Within UMass Amherst, the project is hosted at the Political Economy Research Institute, and there we really benefited from the vision and the support of Professors James Boyce, Bob Poland, Jerry Epstein, and Nicole Denham. I'd like to also thank and acknowledge the generous support of the Carnegie Corporation of New York, and in particular, the support of Hillary Wiesner and Nihal Amer, whose support really enabled us to carry forward this vision and make this project happen. Finally, I'd like to thank Jonathan Jones, and Claire O'Brien, who have been working behind the scenes for a long time to make this event happen today. They're research assistants with Security in Context. So thank you, John and Claire, for putting all this together. So yes, a round of applause to everyone. Well, I'd like to bring on our first speakers, and I'd like to introduce Professors Paul Amar and Firat Demir. We are very lucky to be starting the project with two key partnerships in the US of centers who have a stellar reputation and commitment for studying the themes we care about from global perspectives. These two centers will be hosting and developing significant programming for Security in Context that draws on their distinguished team of researchers, as well as their own networks that are really throughout the world that help us advance the mission of this project and really amplify the messages that we're producing and engaging with. And First, I'd like to introduce Professor Paul Amar, Professor of Global Studies at the University of California, Santa Barbara, and Director of the Orfalea Center for Global and International Studies. Paul is going to talk to us a little bit about the Orfalea Center and also the kind of work that they're going to be supporting through the Security in Context initiative.
Thanks so much, Omar, and it's great to see everybody. I'm so excited about this project and learned so much with this interaction with Omar and Nicole and Firat and Karim, and many years in the making. So it's super exciting, and I'm so glad to be working here at UCSB with Lisa Hajjar, who from the years long before, but through her time at AUB and in a dozen other really incredible experiences, we've done a lot, and this will be a great forum for us to work together. So I'm just going to go through, I know we have limited time, but I want to go through three small spheres of background and action that develop a little bit the substantive roles that the Orfalea Center will play in relation to this project. But just to underline that this is the beginning, and the conversations will go in all kinds of directions. So everyone feel free to weigh in, and we are very flexible at the Orfalea Center. So just a little context. So the Orfalea Center is a large humanities and social science research center at UCSB. I think it's the largest of its kind at the university. If you guys have ever made photocopies of your MA thesis at Kinko's or used them to get online back in the days of internet cafes, well, that is our endowment. The Orfalea Center is the Kinko's endowment. So we're putting all that money back into academic research and Global South partnerships of knowledge. So that's where our funds come from. We have a staff. We have 4 full-time staff in addition to myself. We have 42 graduate student fellows, and we have more than 25 Global South partners, which are research centers everywhere from Palestine to Angola to Brazil to Indonesia, who are basically activists or publicly engaged research centers that will be then available to participate in this network, in addition to the fantastic extensive network that already exists. We have 32 faculty from across the humanities and social sciences that work with us directly. They are all selected because they are specialists in area studies places, whether it's Africa or East Asia or South Asia or the Middle East, but they're also asking transcontinental questions that are of urgent interest to publics that are particularly at the front lines of conflict or targeting or marginalization economically and politically. So it fits very well, kind of our center's methodology with what we're doing in this project. So we have a large group of graduate students, from most of whom are international, working with the project. We have Global South and East partners, and we have a transnationally oriented area studies faculty working with it. So now, second, I want to talk a little bit about the way that security studies and insecurity studies is examined at the center, in terms of where I come from in the field, and also how I'm kind of sensing the interests of this body of partners that work with the center. And then third, I'll specify a couple of the actual substantive interventions we're going to do. So this part about, security studies from our standpoint is different from that of international relations approaches to security studies, which I know all of us are invested in critiquing. But our center and its members often come from other completely different conversations, but that are immediately relevant. They come from cultural studies, critiques of the prison and carceral state, from the Stuart Hall tradition of looking at criminalization to the abolitionist traditions of looking at the carceral and the police state, to decolonial perspectives on counterinsurgency and imprisonment in the Fanonian or in the Caribbean transcontinental resistance tradition. So completely separate from international relations, but absolutely relevant, and in terms of global civil society conversations about the intersection between race, neocoloniality, and security are obviously immediately relevant to today. So second, we also focus on the connections between a triangular of connections between criminalization of bodies, whether because of race or sexuality or ethnicity, militarization of states, and then securitization of public spheres. So again, those three spheres demand a much more interdisciplinary set of perspectives than just looking at the state actors or the non-state actors, which are almost produced as the shadow analytical sphere of statist methodologies. So that means work like Nicole's on technology, or Lisa Hajjar's on the law, or work at our school on the subjects of race and sexuality is absolutely central. So, and I can go on in terms of the way that decolonial and de-imperial scholarship, which we focus on a lot at this center, basically methodological approaches that don't reproduce the monolithic or Eurocentric ideas about how security is defined and produced, but also pays attention to semi-peripheral actors, comprador actors in the global south, forms of economic and military power that emerge not just in the US and in the British and French empires, but also in the global south in new ways. Paramilitary actors, vigilante actors, the kind of militia formations we're seeing proliferating everywhere. That requires a notion of culture, of land, of racism, masculinity, technology, arms economies, plantation economies, all that, which are very marginal to security studies, but which will be centered to our approaches. So finally, in terms of specific interventions, so I'm going to pass the torch to Lisa Hajjar in a second, but we are with Lisa Hajjar in the lead, along with a cluster of researchers that work on the war on terror, not just in the Middle East in the past 20 years, but also in Latin America since the war on the left in the 1960s, and also the kind of war on terror in relationship to the terrorization of the Black diaspora in the last 500 years. So those will be tied together, but specifically around the commemoration, which is not the right word, of the 20th anniversary of 9/11 will be a major center of events that Lisa Hajjar will talk about. And then second, we're focusing a lot on gender and race and militarization and security with a set of graduate student projects working on Africa, Latin America, and the Middle East. And then third, this methodological unpacking of what it means to be decolonial and non-Eurocentric or de-imperial in elaborating security studies. So I'll pass the mic to Lisa Hajjar. Thank you very much.
Okay. Well, it's a pleasure to be here and to build ties with all of you, or to renew or strengthen ties with those of you whom I know. The sort of hub that I'm going to be working on through the Orfalea Center and in conjunction with security and context, it was a happy coincidence that something that I'm obsessed with was also something that Omar and Samer and others had the idea of, and so we came together, and it's the legacies of the global war on terror. So the 20th anniversary of the war on terror is next September 2021. And one of the things that I'm interested in working on is really thinking comparatively and sort of historically about what is unique and what is not so unique about the US global war on terror, and how is it actually affected or drawn from models of violence or models of legal struggle from other parts of the world. At least in terms of, among the things we can think about, the US, the two strategic cornerstones of the US war on terror were first, torture, because they didn't know who they were fighting and they figured torture would be a good way to find terrorists. And then, as a result of years of litigation by US lawyers challenging the US torture policy, the government realized they couldn't keep on getting away with this. So in 2006, the actual active practice of torturing people more or less tapers off, and it's succeeded then by targeted killing, extrajudicial execution. And that's been one of the ways, at least through the Obama administration. So there's many ways we can think about how the legacies of the war on terror in all of its forms, beyond just violence and the law, those are my two particular interests, come to bear. I'll give just one example. One of the locations where, and the lawyers involved in trying to prosecute the US officials responsible for torture, foremost former Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, was in Germany. And it was like, sort of German human rights lawyers teaming up with American human rights lawyers, unsuccessful because Donald Rumsfeld still walks free, and so does Dick Cheney, but keep hope alive. That same sort of legal configuration in Germany is now in the process of prosecuting Syrian torturers for the first time. So in some ways, the skills that these people develop to sort of build cases against, people from a country as powerful as the secretive as the United States, at least while they didn't get Rumsfeld, they are now going after some of the Syrian torturers. But we're particularly interested in, at least in the hub at the Orfalea Center, and in conjunction with Security and Context, is really thinking sort of trans-regionally about Latin America, the Middle East, Europe, and the United States, and thinking about the different kinds of flows, influences, struggles, resistances, discourses. So we're going to be planning, this year, and anybody who's interested, please feel free to, reach out by email to me. But we will be trying to, put together some programming, public talks and other kinds of things, and perhaps research papers to build up towards the 20th anniversary of the start of the war on terror and continuing on next year. So anyway, it'll be a pleasure to work with all of you. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much, Lisa and Amar. It's really great to hear the work, and really looking forward to our collaborations this year and beyond this year. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Firat Demir, who's a professor of economics at the University of Oklahoma and a researcher and director at the Center for Peace and Development, who will be really the other major partner in the US in terms of hosting significant programming. There's going to be slightly different themes at the CPD, but Firat will tell us a little bit more about them.
Amar, and hello everybody. It's nice to see all the partners in one place and put faces and names together for the first time. This is really exciting, and I'm personally very excited, but we also at the Center for Peace and Development very excited to be a part of this exciting new initiative, which will allow us to not only expand and deepen our understanding of insecurity and production and recreation of insecurity along multiple dimensions, but also to expand our network of both friends, researchers, academics, and also practitioners on the field. Let me give a brief background about the center at the University of Oklahoma first, and then give a few words about the project that we'll be working in partnership with Security and Context, and also thanks to a generous grant from the Carnegie Corporation. So the Center for Peace and Development is an interdisciplinary center at the University of Oklahoma. It is committed to knowledge creation and particularly community-based participatory action in post-conflict societies. Now, its overreaching goal is to play a meaningful role, and it's in highlights a meaningful role in transformative peace building, confronting race, gender, and class oppressions in conflict-affected communities. Now, as CPD, we see peace building as a long-term and multifaceted and particularly grassroots effort, that it cannot be top-down, but it needs to be bottom-up. Empowering the participants on the ground rather than coming from outside and enforcing set of actions or solutions that are external to the society. So the CPD's primary actions and programs since its foundation in 2017 are in northern Uganda, and has a long-term vision to work with communities globally towards transformative peace building. And this is where the partnership with Security and Context becomes really meaningful. What makes the CPD unique in our view is its commitment to bottom-up community action and a focus on grassroots community-based research. Its programs in northern Uganda are currently guided by a consortium of 10 grassroots women's organizations, and they help co-create program priorities and actions. And we really are emphasizing that aspect of our center and our goals, that all the programs we develop are co-creations together with our partners, rather than us determining and dictating what those priorities are. We develop them together with our partners and let them choose and decide what those priorities are. Now, at the CPD, we focus on balancing academic pursuits like traditional research and other pedagogical approaches like teaching with community-engaged research and action. Some of the outputs that we have managed to create in the last 3 years since its foundation includes a School of Basic Learning for Women in Northern Uganda, an annual Women's Grassroots Peace-Building Conference that are developed together with over 50 different organizations in Northern Uganda. Managed to conduct a baseline survey of women's grassroots organizations that had 3 rounds of surveys with participants from ground up, and the Women's Advocacy Network Photo Voice project that have been created. Now, the CPD is also unique, I think, among other centers for offering significant service learning opportunities to both undergraduates and graduate students, as well as faculty. It offers significant training. We work alongside community leaders on programs that are prioritized by local grassroots organizations. We work at the University of Oklahoma with 6 different colleges, our partners, and this is truly a trans and interdisciplinary center. Our partners include health sciences, education, economics, business, history, women and gender studies, medicine, international relations, and so on and so forth. Like, for example, the School of Medicine and Health Sciences offer internship opportunities even for their doctoral students, medical students in Northern Uganda right now. The vision of security in context and the CPD overlap to a remarkable extent, which is what also makes this really exciting and promising partnership. And we hope that this will continue for many years to come. The project that I'll be directing together with the Security in Context network is broadly titled as Peace, Conflict, and International Political Economy. We'll mostly focus on 3 modes of intervention, which are collaborative research and pedagogical projects, mentorship of junior scholars and graduate students, and we'll have significant public engagement and advocacy. The goal is to challenge dominant paradigms and produce alternative knowledges on security and insecurity related topics, particularly on 4 separate topics. One is multipolarity and the new South-South exchanges. So the new South-South exchanges have been touted sometimes as a big success, as a challenge to the Northern paradigms, but at other times as a reproduction of the same type of issues, problems, and insecurities that dominated the North-South relations in the past 200 or so years. A second mode is on financialization and militarization, that together with the multipolarity topic, we'll be looking at the production of insecurity through the militarization of defense industries, war making, and intra and inter-regional partnerships in the production of financialization of military. A third one is we'll look at human development in conflict and post-conflict societies, particularly focusing on women and children that are usually the most affected from any conflict in a society, or at least the first affected ones. To give an example, in most post-conflict peace resolutions like brokered by United Nations and others, they focus on combatants, either state actors or non-state actors, and usually women and children are left as an afterthought. And we do believe that this makes those peace agreements very temporary and not permanent. And a fourth one will be data generation and research in conflict zones. In addition to providing data and producing data, we also hope to share our expertise in conducting research in conflict zones. What are some of the ethics and methodologies that we need to pay attention to, how to conduct research in those societies, which is not something that I personally learned at graduate school, right? We don't learn, when we learn data sciences or methodologies, we don't spend much time about how to conduct ethical research in a conflict zone or in a post-conflict zone. And we hope to expand those research nodes together with our partners from Security in Context. I'll stop here.
Thank you so much, Firat, and thank you for that overview of the work you'll be doing. We'll be hearing a little bit later on from Professor Dr. Shana Marshall, who through video, who's going to be co-leading the financialization and militarism theme that you mentioned. Next, however, I'd like to, I'd like to invite several of our colleagues who have been instrumental, not just in thinking through the project with us, but also in helping us think through what it means to have a network of individuals or organizations that engage with perspectives from the Global South on their own terms, and what it means to really have a meaningful North-South and South-South dialogue on the core issues that we're going to be thinking about. As you might expect, a lot of these topics are very challenging to research. They're challenging in various ways, both logistical challenges and also security challenges as well for the researchers, particularly the researchers who are based in areas that are experiencing conflict or various processes of securitization, but also not just in the Global South, but worldwide. As the projects develops, these networks, some of them who are here today and others will be developing significant research that enriches our understanding of how insecurities are experienced in various contexts. To admit something, to be more forthcoming about it, many of the individuals who you're going to hear from in a second have been represented either themselves or through someone representing them in an amazing meeting that we had in Beirut, Lebanon, back in late February, in person, before the COVID era. And that meeting was really incredibly rich. Unfortunately, it was an internal meeting that only those participants were there, but it was really formative in our thinking, both in terms of substantive issues, but also in terms of the process and how do we think about the process moving forward. So I asked them to come back and share with us, talk a little bit about their centers, talk a little bit about the research, and perhaps some of the themes that this project might think about taking up. So with that, I'd like to introduce Professor Fikret Adaman from Boğaziçi University. He's a professor of economics who is also affiliated with the Human Development Research Center. So Fikret, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, it's my pleasure and honor to be a part of this project, and thank you very much, Amar and Firat and other colleagues. Yes, so I'll be participating under the Human Development Research Center of Boğaziçi University. Boğaziçi in Turkish means the Bosphorus. So the university is based in Istanbul on the European side of the Bosphorus Strait, and was founded in 1863 as Rabat College, the very first American higher education institution outside the United States, but currently since 1974, we have been under entirely Turkish administration. Well, the research center, as the name suggests, basically deals with topics on human development, and we are very much interested in questions on peace, conflict, resolution, and perhaps above all on power, asymmetries of power. Well, the entry point in the research will be to unpack the likely relationship between neoliberalism and violence. Well, I mean, first of all, we think that neoliberalism, by definition, imposes the market logic. So there is an imposition over the society of an ideology. So this, by definition, is a kind of violence to start with. But in the current days, we furthermore observe a decline in democracy, decline in human rights, a rise in authoritarian measures. So as a way to counterweight the rising authoritarian structures. More and more states, governments have been relying on populist policies, some of which include, nationalism, politics of polarization, and so on and so forth. So we can see the link between violence and neoliberalism. And what we will try to do is basically to understand the link, first of all, at a theoretical level, and secondly, and if possibly, at a more sort of concrete level, by ways of investigating the different ways through which that link has been manifested in different geographies. So let me stop here and let others provide their inputs. Thank you very much again.
Thank you very much, Fikret. Next, I'd like to introduce Rabie Nasser, the director and co-founder of the Syrian Center for Policy Research.
Good evening, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Amar, and congratulations on the launch of the very important and interesting initiative that it is very timely and important in this circumstances in our region. I'm a researcher at the Syrian Center for Policy Research, and it's independent non-for-profit research center. We are glad to have, I would say, organic relations and goals with the initiative in many terms. We work since 2011 on Syria and the conflict in Syria. But now we are working on different countries in this region, including Sudan, Yemen, Egypt, and Lebanon. We are working mainly on policy-oriented research, but we are very interested in the theoretical framework and how to develop the political economy of conflict, our understanding of roots and impact dynamics, and looking for future scenarios to transform the conflict foundations toward a more sustainable development in a critical perspective. The center worked in depth in several aspects that I think it's relevant as, if I can say, as social determinants of insecurity, including the demographic transitions and related policies, the social relations and social capital, the solidarity, the economic development, including the political economy of conflict or conflict economies, in addition to the deterioration of institutions and the transformation from, we said, institutional bottleneck or suffocation before the conflict to institutional tyranny. And this is including the state and non-state actors. We try to understand the key determinants of conflict, how it's fueled through regional, global, and internal factors and foundations. And I think this is mainly related to the complicated of this region and the deterioration that we have seen during the last decade. We try to build some alternatives, like the transformation from conflict economies toward solidarity economies, the transformation from bond social capital or traditional social capital toward structural social capital as a reinvestment in role of society. And as my colleagues said before, that we are working on the participatory approach, looking for reinvestment in the role of society to be the creator of the future institutions rather than the top-down approach that we have it now. The other issue that is related to this context, if I can say, is the spillover or the trans effect across nations of conflict and its impact on the region. So what we are seeing since the Arab Spring, that we have identity politics, which expanded in a way that increased HEDRU, polarization, fragmentation across the region. We have huge conflict economies, and we have a new kind of institutions that use the violence and use the normalizing using of violence across different countries in the region. And it is alarming for more degradation in the future. And I hope that this initiative can address these issues in a critical way that can engage with the society, community, to have a better future or better policies for the future. And I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rabie. It's good to see you again. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Zaynab al-Bernoussi, who is an assistant professor of international politics at Sciences Po Rabat, and also formerly affiliated with the Human and Economic Development Research Institute at the Akhawayn University in Ifran, and really helped and was instrumental in developing the partnerships with those two institutions. So thank you, Zaynab, for joining us.
Thank you for having me. Thank you to everyone for attending this very exciting launch. I'm honored to be with such a group of inspiring individuals, and I'm so grateful to Amar for his leadership and dedication to this needed network in our region. I can't thank him enough. Let me here say a few words about what I really like about security in context, what the two affiliations that I represent mean, and what are my research interests in the group. What I really like about security in context is the focus on both research and pedagogy, because as an educator and as a researcher, I believe that the synergy of the two missions increases understandings of one's context. And I can speak for the case of Morocco, where I feel that I'm learning so much from my students. My dear colleague, Jalil Lounas, or Shriki in Algerian, shout out, kindly represented our group at the Beirut meeting, which really inspired the ideas that formed the project. So the unit at Akhawayn HEDRU focuses on global issues of human development, particularly those that can be studied in the rural Middle Atlas region, such as child marriage. My current principal position at Sciences Po in Rabat, which so the institution is known for promoting, in the aftermath of the 2011 demonstration in Morocco, the blog Ferziyat, Arabic for inequalities, to promote the discussion on issues of precarity and equality in Morocco. Our institution has also a strong Africa focus. My research interests in the group can be synthesized in 3 Ds, so dignity, democracy, and development. This started with ethnographic work on demands of dignity during the 2011 revolution in Egypt, and analysis of the constitutional process in which there was an institutionalization of dignity, and the Arabic form karama to be specific, as part of a democratic and developmental vision in Tunisia. I argue that there is a specific historical contextualization of Arab dignity that is essential to embed to projects of democratization and economic development in the region. I believe it's important to look at these 3 Ds because, well, first, they are desired by many people in the region, and they have been a recurrent demand in 1956 Suez, 28 Gafsa in Tunisia, and since 2011 in the Arab world. The demands of dignity recognition that I look at relate to an ontological and identity related insecurity. So that was also a point raised by Rabie. For many individuals, and I hope to better understand and explain. I also hope that this can inspire similar inquisitive projects to support maybe a dignity index. Lastly, I hope to contribute to a pedagogical teaching program on Sino-Arab relations. And that's it for me. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you so much, Zaynab. And yes, I'd like to thank our dear colleague Jalil, who also attended that meeting. So both of you have been really instrumental in helping us think about this. I'd like to now introduce Dr. Giulia Dardiry from the Beirut School of Critical Security Studies, a working group, and the Arab Council for Social Sciences. Really, as I mentioned in the introduction, the roots, or some of the main roots of this project lie in the wonderful work of the Arab Council and the Beirut School, and I'm very happy to have Giulia representing it today and telling us a little bit about their work.
Yes, hi everyone. Thanks, Amar. Hello to my fellow panelists and all the attendees. It's great to be here. So as Amar said, I'm here representing the Beirut School of Critical Studies, which was launched in 2016 with the support of the Arab Council for the Social Sciences in Beirut. So the overarching goal of our group is really to critically engage existing academic and policy debates about security in the Arab region, while also developing alternative approaches and understandings of security and insecurity that center the concerns and experiences of people in the region and scholars from the region and the global South more broadly. So we want to contribute to this existing conversation on theorizing and understanding security from and for the non-West. And among many of the reasons that sort of led to this project, I think two key issues are that the Arab region is, of course, subject to intense Western and global security policies, so military interventions, counterterrorism activities, et cetera. And the intensity, variety, and scale of the insecurities in the region, in a way, provide a fertile site to think about security and insecurity. But at the same time, a lot of the work on security in the region remains really heavily constrained by the legacy of Cold War bipolarity and Anglo-American policy interests. So a way of thinking security and insecurity, as a way of thinking security and insecurity differently, the work of the school is organized under 5 broad themes that are managed by a network of scholars, and these sort of guide all of the work of the school. And the themes are political economy of insecurity and security, insecurity of everyday life, technologies of security, discourses and genealogies of knowledge production, and borders, migration, and mobility. And I won't go into details of each of them, they're on the website, but those are broadly the themes that structure our work. Now, some of the activities that have come out of the school thus far, a very big activity is our annual summer school on critical security studies, which started in 2017. And it's usually held in Beirut, though this year it will have to partially be virtual because of COVID. So this school brings together doctoral students, early career scholars, junior researchers who are interested in security in the Arab world, and it brings them together with a team of established faculty who train them and mentor them on different theoretical issues, methodological approaches to really try to advance critical research on security in the Arab world. So in parallel with this summer school, we also, through the ACSS, provide Arab scholars with small grants for research on critical security. And we organize small workshops to support the themes that our working group members are investigating. And we also have a website, the Beirut Forum website, which serves as a hub to disseminate our work and other content that's relevant to security in the Arab region. So before I pass off the baton, I just wanted to give you an example of a more concrete example of the work that we do. So together with Sami Hermez, who was one of the original core group members of the Beirut School and has been really central to this also security in context projects. Shout out to Sami, I think he's watching. So Sami and I, in early 2018, started thinking about a collaborative project that we could do around the theme of insecurity and everyday life. And this theme explores the micro relations of everyday experiences of security and insecurity by really taking people's own experiences as the starting points for what it might mean to feel secure or insecure. And we were also interested in looking at the strategies that people employ to contend with the many insecurities in the region. So with the support of the ACSS and the Wenner Grant Foundation and Northwestern University in Qatar, we organized a workshop in Beirut in September 2018 that brought together 17 scholars working across the region and really brought them together to think through the turmoil in the region from the perspective of people's everyday experiences. And this process of collective thinking is ongoing, but it has already resulted in a collection of essays that we just published in Cultural Anthropology. It's open access, so you can check it out. And these essays really take the Middle East as a case through which to build anthropological knowledge about how insecurity is understood, produced, and deployed by bringing an ethnography as a methodology to bear on the concept. So that's just one example of the sorts of work that we hope to push forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Giulia, so much. Well, everyone has been amazing in sticking to the time. That's great. That's incredible, but wonderful. Actually, we had also Dr. Karim Magdisi, who is the professor at the American University of Beirut and director of the Public Policy and International Affairs, but I think an electricity cut in Beirut meant that he's not here at the moment, but he's been really also one of our key interlocutors and advisors in this project from the very beginning. He was also at that meeting in Beirut. I hope he can log on before the end of the broadcast, but he'll be among the people that we really fully engage with moving forward. But with that, I'll then move to Professor Nicole Grove, who is leading one of our research themes in the project. Professor Lisa Hajjar mentioned the global legacies of the global war on terror is one of them, but Nicole's group is really focusing on technologies of surveillance, although I'll let her talk a little bit more about the project. She's an associate professor in political science at the University of Hawaii, Manoa. And you can read her full bio on our website. Nicole, thank you so much for joining us and talking to us a little bit about the working group that you're leading.
Thanks, Amar. Thanks for having me. It's really great to be in conversation with everyone today. I'm really excited about this project and also the really amazing work that's already coming out of it. I'm here to speak briefly about the Endemic Infrastructures Working Group and some of the themes and the questions that we're engaging. This is an interdisciplinary working group, which is focusing on how understandings and experiences of threat and risk, of security and insecurity are produced and also negotiated at the intersections of data flows, technological systems, and the built environment. So one of the ways that I think that this theme contributes to the overall efforts of the Security in Context project is really in how it's thinking about new political challenges around things like the proliferation of smart infrastructure, of the globalization of security and surveillance technologies, and also questions around things like social cohesion and disinformation outside of the context of the US, Europe, and the UK, where a lot of these modes of inquiry, I think, are often situated. So this group is really focusing on the transnational dynamics of these shifts. A number of members of our group are looking at these questions from a global South perspective, and our working group members are very diverse in their approaches. So they're academics, but also activists and practitioners, and so they're coming to these questions and engagements in lots of different ways. The group right now is currently thinking through the scope of this project around 3 themes. And so the first theme we're calling the planetary drift of carceral reason. So here we're asking what kinds of security politics and geopolitical relations are driving the global dissemination of technologies that are used for surveillance, that are used for data capture, and also carceral enclosure. So we're interested in how technologies designed for different purposes are really pulled into the gravitational sphere of global security, of carcerality and surveillance regimes, and also to what effect. Within this theme, we're also looking at the challenges that these apparatuses reveal and pose to our understandings of things like privacy, rights, and transparency, which really, depending on where you're writing from, can have different meanings and different possibilities. And we're also looking at the kinds of local and institutional responses that are needed to address the carceral creep of technologies that are used to facilitate so many facets of our everyday life. The second theme is, sorry, just started pouring here in Honolulu. I'm not sure if you can hear that. The second theme is we're calling the communication and contestation after the public. So this theme considers the shift from public spaces to media spaces, and then back again into public spaces, elite-driven media sources, and the kind of shift to user-generated content, and also the interfacing of state propaganda and multi-actor information ecologies, disinformation and misinformation that are altering capacities for communication and also control. So here we're looking at things like memes, doxing, network disruption, deep fakes, right? How are these things fundamentally altering the nature of political discourse and political action, or are they just merely intensifying the enmity of cities, right, that are already striated by racialized and class divisions? So these are questions that we're looking at. We're also interested in how these media ecologies interface with escalating violence in cities and urban spaces that are over-policed, and where people are underrepresented within established modes of government and political organization. And we're exploring in different ways what new forms of political action and direct action are emerging and changing the dynamics of power, resistance in this context. The third theme we're calling design and crisis, crisis in design. So under this theme, we're exploring the kinds of life worlds that are being designed and deployed in surveillance-saturated spaces for commerce, for security and living, where states of exception have really become the new normal. So we're looking at the inheritances of built environments in this context and what kinds of futures they're bringing into being or potentially preventing from coming into being. We're looking at how design and engineering reproduce past and present inequalities, and also, again, the inheritances of these infrastructural practices. And then finally, we're looking at the kinds of relations and also intimacies that are exposed to increased predation, while other relations may be foreclosed entirely. Then also, the unaccounted novelties and new forms of life that are emerging in spite of these kinds of best laid plans of designers and engineers. So we, in terms of things that we're organizing right now, we're thinking through organizing a number of symposia around these themes. We have a group publication on the theme that we're planning, and then also a 2-day workshop that's focused on mentorship for junior scholars and graduate students around this theme, which is modeled in part around some of the work that we've done with the Beirut Summer School and Security Studies presented with the ACSS, and which I'm really grateful that I've been able to be a part of since its inception, excuse me. So yeah, we're really excited about future collaborations with security and context colleagues, and also if anybody's interested in the group who is watching and wants to get involved in any capacity, please feel free to get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Also, thank you for joining us so early there and also allowing us to hear the sounds of what it means to be in Manoa, where many of us wish we were at this moment. So we vicariously traveled to Hawaii through your intervention. So thanks so much. The last speaker is not here with us, but she sent us a video. So this is going to be really meta. We're on Zoom, and also we're going to be sharing a video, and it's really an exciting research track that Firat alluded to, which is on financialization and militarism. We're going to be hearing from Dr. Shana Marshall of George Washington University. She's an associate director of the Institute for Middle East Studies, and research faculty member at the George Washington University's Elliott School of International Affairs. So let me share the video of Nicole, and hopefully everyone will be able to see it. It's a 2-minute long video, and we'll be concluding right after that.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I couldn't be there with you today. My name is Shana Marshall. I'm the Associate Director of the Institute for Middle East Studies at George Washington University and co-convener, along with Firat, who I'm sure you've met, of the research track on financialization and militarization, which looks at the intersection of the financialization of the global economy and how that's related to the increased militarization of production globally.
Is everyone able to see the video? No?
Yes, but it's tiny.
Oh, okay. Let me see if I can make it bigger.
That connection was originally made very clear to me through my own dissertation research, which looked at offset contracts, which are commercial agreements signed between global defense firms and procuring country governments, usually about investing some portion of the overall sale contract into the domestic economy of the procuring country as a way of encouraging procuring countries to purchase weapons from a particular firm. And what I noticed was that more often than not, these sales contracts, these offset agreements, were commodified and sort of securitized, and defense firms could swap them and sell them sort of on a global market back and forth to each other in order to dispense with their obligations to the procuring country. And it created a whole complementary industry of brokers and intermediaries and management consultants who designed and implemented and traded these agreements. And then I subsequently looked more into this and discovered that many defense firms have venture capital arms, and that there's an increasing number of private equity firms that are also very focused on supporting and purchasing small firms that are focused on production in the military sector or in military and intelligence and defense applications. And to what extent these were feeding off of each other and causing an increased focus and increased investment in militarized activities globally. So we have put together a working group of economists and political scientists and some practitioners who focus on the global arms trade to look at how these are related, to put together some research materials, some policy papers, and have several meetings, including public sort of outreach meetings where we can talk about what this research agenda looks like, the impact that we think it has on the global economy, and as well as the impact we think it has on the security of populations around the globe. So we're excited to get started working on this project, and check back on the website, and hopefully we'll have some material there for you soon. Thanks for having me, and hope to hear from many of you soon.
All right, thanks to Shana for sending that in, and thank you everybody for sticking with us until today. I'd like to thank all our panelists for their wonderful engagements and interventions. I hope this hour gave you a sense of where the project's at and where it's heading. Thank you for attending. I'm just going to end by basically saying that the experiences of the past months and years, of course, for many of us are been really significantly shaped by increasing xenophobia, right-wing agitation, racism, and various devastating disruptions brought about by COVID, but also beyond COVID for many people. And I think one of the effects of COVID is really increasing alienation and fragmentation of scholarly communities, of many communities around the world, scholarly, activist, policy communities. And really we're determined to try and overcome that by accelerating our reaching out, networking, linking together to try our best as possible in this time when we're all aware of the political context, really try to overcome despair and do some positive work. So thank you all for coming. Thank you for attending. Please reach out if you're interested in participating in the project, and we really look forward to working and developing this project together. Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Omar and all. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Omar. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.